Hello everyone, this is Fahim Ansari, Associate Professor in Pharmaceutical Sciences. Today we are going to discuss about the carbohydrates, what are the carbohydrates and how they are utilized, or the classification of the carbohydrates, some test on the carbohydrates, etc. The carbohydrates, the content of these videos is as follows. Firstly, the carbohydrates, the definition of the carbohydrate and introduction of the carbohydrates, then sources of the carbohydrates, from which sources we get the carbohydrates, then classification of the carbohydrates on criteria, then the reaction of the carbohydrates, and in the digestion and absorption of carbohydrate takes place in human body, and some important carbohydrates and that are essential or mostly utilized by animals. And the definition of the carbohydrate is as follows. Carbohydrates are the polyhydroxyaldehyde or ketones, or the compounds that can be hydrolyzed to them, means simple polyhydroxyaldehyde or ketones. They contains large number of large number of the hydroxy group and one from aldehyde or ketone groups in their chemical structures. They are the simple which cannot be further hydrolyzed, but if we hydrolyze any compound and it gives the polyhydroxyaldehyde or ketone, it is said to be the carbohydrates. Carbohydrates is an organic compound comprising only carbon, hydrogen and oxygen. This contains three atoms: carbon, hydrogen or oxygen. Or carbon or hydrogen, usually hydrogen and oxygen ratio is as ratio as in the water, means 2:1, 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen. Carbohydrates are technically hydrates of the carbons, and the empirical formula of carbohydrates are CN bracket start H2O bracket close N, means the number of carbon and number of oxygen equals, and number of hydrogen is double than oxygen or carbon. Now we comes on the sources of the carbohydrate, from which sources the carbohydrates can be obtained by the animals or the humans. Mostly dietary carbohydrates comes from the plants. Sugar and starch are the nutritive carbohydrates. They broken down and utilized by the body to providing the energy to the body. Although the dietary fiber is also a carbohydrate, it contributes no calories because it is not digested or absorbed. Some of the grain products and a large number of carbohydrates comes for the human needs and animal needs comes from the grains products like rice, wheats. Grains naturally contains high concentration of the starch, which our digestive system breaks down into sugar, and it can be easily utilized and absorbed by the body. Uh, Next, beans. Some of the beans and starchy vegetables such as potatoes, yams, green peas and corn starches high level of complex carbohydrates that our body digests into the sugars. And some other sources of the carbohydrates are fruits and fruit juices, which contains the carbohydrates in the natural sugars, which is easily absorbable by the body of human bodies, like glucose in the form of glucose and fructose. And some of the beverages like milk is also contain the sugar. Dairy milk is the only significant source of the dietary carbohydrates which is not derived from the plants. A cup of unflavored milk contains 11 to 12 gram of carbohydrates in the form of milk sugar or in the lactose. Milk contains the lactose sugar. Some of the sweets and the added sugars we eat, the candies, desserts, markedly boost the number of carbohydrates in our body. Now we comes on the classification of the carbohydrates. How the carbohydrates are classified. The carbohydrates are classified into the classes or the various groups depending upon the whether these undergo hydrolysis and if so on the number of products formed after the hydrolysis. On the base of this or the number of the uh, simple polyhydroxyaldehyde which can be further hydrolyzed are contained. Firstly, the monosaccharides contain one saccharides and disaccharides, trisaccharides, oligosaccharides, polysaccharides. These are according to numbers. Monosaccharides are the one moiety or one sugar molecule, disaccharides two sugar molecules, trisaccharides contains the three molecules. Oligosaccharides are generally a class which contains 2 to 10 number of uh, sugar components, and polysaccharides contain multiple more than 10 numbers. Firstly, we will discuss about the monosaccharides. Monosaccharides are the molecules having one potential sugar groups are called monosaccharides. Means these are the carbohydrates which contains only one molecules of the saccharides. Saccharides means carbohydrates, the simpler which cannot be further hydrolyzed into polyhydroxyaldehyde or ketones. Some of the glucose, fructose, and sugar having aldehyde groups are called aldose, and the sugars having the ketone groups are called ketoses. Depending upon the number of atoms, monosaccharides are named as triose, tetrose, pentose, hexose, heptose, and so on. The disaccharides. What are the disaccharides? As the name indicates, disaccharides means di means two. Though these are the two monosaccharides are combined together with eliminates of a water molecule is called the disaccharides. The monosaccharides are combined by the glycosidic bond contains the two disaccharides. And disaccharides are further, some of the disaccharides are sucrose, maltose, trehalose, lactose, and malibose. These contain the different kinds of the monosaccharides, means one of aldose or one of ketose, or both may be the ketose or both may be the aldose. Means sucrase gives the glucose and two fructose, maltose gives one glucose and two glucose molecules. Now we comes the oligosaccharides. Oligosaccharides are the carbohydrates which contains two or more than two but up to 10 units of the molecules of the monosaccharides. Some oligosaccharides get absorbed in the small intestine after getting hydrolyzed. Means the oligosaccharides is not directly absorbed but they are absorbed when they get hydrolyzed into the simple sugars or the monosaccharides. And the disaccharides is also comes in the category of oligosaccharides, but some of the disaccharides are very important, so we will study a separate class based on the number of the sugars unit which contains in the are in the oligosaccharides. Means if contains three saccharides it is called the trisaccharides, contains four then it is tetrasaccharides, contains five then it is called pentasaccharides, contains six then called hexasaccharides, contains seven so called is heptasaccharides. Now the polysaccharides. Polysaccharides are the carbohydrates which are the polymerized products of the a large number of the monosaccharide units. They may be the homo or the heterotype polysaccharides. Homopolysaccharide means contains same type of the molecules of the monosaccharides, like it contains single types like contains sugar, glucose, 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 or contain fructose, fructose, fructose. While the heterotype polysaccharides are the polysaccharides which contains different types of, means one glucose, one fructose, one maltose, like this type of chains. Many polysaccharides, unlike sugars, are insoluble in water. The dietary fibers includes polysaccharides and oligosaccharides. that are resistant to digestion and absorption in the human small intestine, but when which are completely or partially fermented by the microorganisms in the large intestine. Now the reactions and the identification test of the carbohydrates. Firstly, the main test which are the reaction gives by the carbohydrates or mainly the reducing sugars are the Benedict reactions or the Bendix reaction. The Benedict reagent contains the sodium carbonate, copper sulfate and sodium citrate. It is generally blue color compound, the Benedict reagent. In alkaline medium, when sugar is added to them, that it endols which will reduce cupric ions and correspondingly the sugar is oxidized, and then any sugar which is free aldehyde or ketone group will reduce Benedict reagent and forms a brick red precipitates in the solutions and called as a reducing sugars. Second is the osazone formation. All reducing sugars will form osazone with excess of phenylhydrazine when kept at boiling temperature. Osazones are insoluble. Each sugar will have characteristic crystals from the osazone, hence they are identified as sugars. Reduction of carbohydrate to form the alcohols. When the carbohydrates are treated with reducing agents such as sodium amalgam, hydrogen can reduce sugars. Aldose yields corresponding alcohols, but ketose forms two alcohols because of the appearance of a new asymmetric carbons. Example, glucose forms sorbitol and fructose forms sorbitol and mannitol. Now the digestion and absorption of the carbohydrates, on the which location it is occur. All the carbohydrates absorbed in the small intestine, not in the large intestine or stomach or any other areas. Maximum absorption occurs in the small intestine. All the carbohydrates absorbed in the form of the monosaccharides, they must be hydrolyzed to the monosaccharides before going to absorption. If they contains in the oligosaccharides, polysaccharides or disaccharides forms, they should be hydrolyzed in the stomach or intestine. Then after it convert into monosaccharides, it gets absorbed. The metabolism of carbohydrate with the action of salivary alpha amylase. The amylase enzyme is the mainly involved in the metabolism of the carbohydrates. Means salivary amylase, it when we chew the in the food in the mouth, it gets alpha amylase which start the metabolism of the carbohydrates. Then pancreatic amylase is in small intestine is more efficient. Mainly the amylase enzyme which contains in the salivary saliva of human and in the saliva of animals, and also contains in the amylase which secreted from the pancreas. Amylase hydrolyze the starch or the compound sugar into the alpha dextrin, which are then digested by the glucoamylase to the maltose and maltotriose. Then these products of the digestion of alpha amylase and alpha dextrins along with the dietary disaccharides are hydrolyzed to their corresponding monosaccharides by the enzymes like maltose by the maltase and isomaltase, and sucrose by the sucrase, and lactase uh, metabolize the lactose. Some of the important carbohydrates which are readily available in our daily life. Firstly, the sucrose, which is an ordinary, it is called the table sugar, means the sugar we consume in our kitchen for our tea, for our beverages to sweeten, to taste them, are the sucrose is the chiefly used. It is sucrose is it is not a reducing sugar. It is a refined sugar obtained from the sugarcane or sugar beets. When sucrose is hydrolyzed, the resulting products are one molecule of glucose and one molecule of fructose. And one of the main sugar is the Our main carbohydrates is the lactose. This is the sugar which is present in the milk. It is a disaccharide type and it is a reducing type. And one of the starch is the main source of the stored carbohydrates in the plants. Starch is composed of a mixture of two substances, amylose and essential linear polysaccharides and amylopectin. It is a highly branched polysaccharides, and it is generally found in the potatoes, carrots, beetroots and some others. Some of the important carbohydrates. One of the important carbohydrates is the glycogen, which is the storage like in the animal and plants. The carbohydrate is stored in the form of starch, but in animal tissue it is stored in the form of the glycogen. The glucose is stored as glycogen in the animal tissues by the process of glycogenesis. When the glucose cannot be stored as glycogen or which can be used immediately for the energy, it is converted to the fat. The glycogen is a polymer of alpha D glucose. The glycogen is easily converted back to glucose to provide energies. And one of the is the cellulose is a polymer of beta 2 glucose. Cellulose is the major structural material of the plant. Wood is the largely cellulose, and the cotton is almost the pure cellulose. The cellulose cannot be hydrolyzed to its constituent glucose emits by the microorganisms that inhibit the digestive tract of termites and the ruminants. Means human cannot digest the glucose, but some of the animals and like the termites and the ruminants, means the sheep, goat, which have the four chambered stomach, can digest some of them partially. Thank you for watching this video, and subscribe our channels and press bell icon uh, if you require more videos and knowledgeable on the pharmacy topics. Thank you.